a lot of the research says that we don't like being married, adult children of divorce, but actually I really, really love that. I love being married. Yeah. And Dawn, what
very well for me, but I loved the thought of being married. I couldn't wait to be married. When I finally got married, I mean, it was like, I did it. I actually did it. And then, then it of course fell apart for me. But if I would have had a different upbringing and had different examples or role models, and having a father that was actually present, then I might have been more successful and had that same experience. And maybe I would have handled it. My kids and I talk about this a lot, where I say, if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have married my husband. And we have a little conflict with that, because if I say that, then it changes who they are. So I have accepted the fact that I am grateful for my marriage. I am sad that it fell apart for my children's sake, but because of them, I have to actually be grateful for that relationship. And that's something that I've had to learn. I had to learn to accept that. And we work on that a lot.
Well, I'd like to flip it back on you ladies for a second, if it's okay. I want to ask y'all some questions.
Okay. Go for it, Eric.
So hopefully everybody knows, what Dawn went through as a child, but she talks about how she didn't have some of those skills in her marriage. And I know you told me that
abandonment, rejection, abuse, emotional, just, I think if there was no abandonment, or if I didn't feel rejected, I may have been able to establish relationships a little bit better, a little bit easier, having the confidence to have a conversation with my mom about it, which I was never able to do.
Right.
Alyse?
Yeah, it's the abandonment and rejection, because when you're not seeing the other parent, and I was in love with my dad, in love with him.
I was too.
When we were being taken away and told all of this stuff, like he would steal us on contact visits, no one would ever see us again. So we were terrified. In my heart, I knew that he would not do that, but I was being told this from other people. So you're in this really weird space, and you do not put children in that space. But then when they leave, you're kind of waiting for a message or a letter or a present or something to come, just so that they're thinking about you. They may not necessarily be there, but they haven't left. They're still thinking about you. And once we realize that they're gone for whatever reason, whether they're being made to go, which was in my case, my dad had a gun held to his head and threatened. So he decided to leave because he was seeing all the terrified faces that we had as children. He chose to back off out of our lives. He didn't want to put us into that situation anymore. But then when we realize they're gone, that is a huge hole of abandonment. And then we're like missing them. They're not dead, but we don't know why they've really gone. We're getting told all this stuff. Do they really think about us? That stays with us. I cried and cried and cried about that for years, because if we don't have that other person there with us, we've only got one person to go to as well. We don't have two. There's, like you said, you used to go to your mum for one thing and your dad for the other thing. We didn't have that. So we're exposed to a lot more people coming through our lives too. A lot of men we don't know. They're like you wake up, there's one in the kitchen. Like, who the heck are you? Your little girl in your 90s standing there trying to get your Wheat Bix. It's like, who are you? And this is what we're exposed to. And dad is not around, or mum is not around. Like, that's not okay. So it's the abandonment, and we feel very rejected. It's like, part of us goes, they don't care enough about us to fight for us. Why aren't they?
We don't have feelings or thoughts. They think we're just children and that we'll just adapt. But that's not true. We are.
No, it's not true.
We have that thought process. We just may not understand exactly what it all means. But as we talk to other people like us, I've realized that we have the same story just with different events. So there's so many similarities and so many parallels. It's uncanny. I mean, we could live in completely different countries, like Alyse and I. We live in completely different countries, but we have the same story with different events. It's the exact same thing. And we kind of all wanted that same thing, wanting to be able to reach out. And I remember I cried myself to sleep wishing my dad would come and rescue me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you
That
just
kind of
want them there.
Okay.
It's a safe zone. It's a safe zone just to be able to feel 100% safe, wrap their arms around us and feel safe for a change instead of being exposed to all who the heck's next, you know?
He was a protector.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Felt safe with him. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know this. And you love them. You can't stop loving somebody just because someone else has decided they're out of your life.
Yeah.
And then when I re-met him, I was like, oh my God, you know, we're the same personality. We're like the same people. Yeah. I'm just a girl version of him. It's like,
and I ended up looking just like my dad. I always wondered, who do I look like? Because I'm thinking I only look like my mom if I'm standing next to her, and that's the only example you have. Right. But if you see me standing next to my dad, and I've asked my mom, do I even look like him? No, not a bit. Well, yeah. I'm told now, oh my gosh, you're like the spitting image of him. You know, a lot of similarities and stuff. And you know, that right there was a big gap that I needed to have healed. So hearing that was like probably one of the biggest wounds that needed to be filled in with the holes that we have. We walk around with these holes. There's that picture that goes around the internet that we've seen with the holes that are part of the parent and part of the child. And it takes that parent to fill those holes.
And once we're reunited, we can say things like, my dad, you know, my dad, whereas when I was little, I could never, ever even be allowed to mention him. So we have conversations, and I say it now quite often, my dad rang me. Like, my dad, I've been talking to my dad. Like, it's
now, if it was
language
for us, we could just as easily be saying my mom, but for us, it was our dad, so we're not trying to be gender, but it could be exactly the same, but I mean, when my dad,
now we get to say it.
Yeah,
we get to and be normal like the rest of society.
We deserve to be able to say that.
And I think that's great, because I think a lot of times people think, you know, when with father absence, that it affects more with a boy, because he wasn't there to teach him how to work on cars or different stuff like that. He is just as critical into his daughter's life as he is his son's. And you ladies just cleared that up. But I got another question for you, Alyse. When we was talking about this, we talk about this pain as a child, and with some of the nastiest divorces that I've seen, especially when you talk to both sides, you know, when you get with somebody, it's because you're attracted to them, because you love them, you got things in common. A lot of times in these nasty divorces, you see people that are attracted to each other's trauma.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Why do you think that is? They bond together over their trauma more than the healthy things. And I think that right there is a surefire sign that you're headed towards something that's not going to be so pretty.
It can be. A lot of people can be trauma bonded, or they can get with people who feel that like they're being seen by the other person for the first time. So it can go either way. So some children, like I've had a guy say to me, oh my God, I could never date you because of your past, like all of the stuff that happened in your past. I can't handle that, and I basically never want to hear about it. But then you might come across another person who has those similar experiences, and you're like, okay, they actually get me. Like Dawn gets me, you know? So we bonded actually over that. But the thing is, you need to be doing your work on yourself. So that's not the only reason why you're together. You need to be together for a whole, like 100 other reasons as well. You have planning a future together that's healthy. They're doing their work as well, so they understand themselves. Often we're children of intergenerational trauma, and we don't understand what that means, and we don't understand how our family system has impacted who we are and what we think and how that affects our relationships. We need to understand all of that. We need to understand who we are, understand that we have childhood trauma. We've done work on it. We're doing work on it. For me, it'll be a lifelong thing. My abandonment wound, something that I work on all the time.
Yeah.
And and I'm with somebody who does have pretty serious childhood stuff, and we can bond on that level, but sure as hell, he does a heap of work on that as well. And so he can understand the trauma that's coming through his family and how it plays out now with us. And we are at the point where he can say, oh my God, that's actually coming from my dad. That stuff, what I'm thinking at the moment, I need to look at it and change the dialogue.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work. It can be done. Just realize that that's actually the space that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Something that Alyse and I were talking about when I was sharing some of my story with her was that my dad never met his father. Never once met him. And his mom died when he was 14. So he had some abandonment issues right there, right? So then, yeah, these are huge abandonment. And then my mom left him. That was another abandonment issue. Then she stole me from him, which is another feeling of abandonment, right? So he has massive abandonment things going on. I felt abandoned because she left me in the very beginning. And then I felt abandoned by him because I didn't know why he didn't come and get me. Because as a child, we're not told these things. We just get to use our imagination. And sometimes that imagination leads us to the worst case scenarios. Like he just didn't care. He didn't love me enough. He just stayed away. And those are abandonment, rejection feelings that I grew up with. So as we're growing up, and this is what's going on in the minds of children, we're still dealing with this intergenerational now abandonment situation that's going on. So now I have to sit in here and realize that when my dad died, I felt abandoned all over again. And it's not his fault, but it's still that feeling. It's that same cycle. So it's really imperative that things happen before it gets to that we heal these wounds way before, and that we don't allow children to be kept away from a safe and fit, loving parent.
You say you felt abandoned all over again, Dawn. Can you expound on that a little bit? What that was like going through that later on again in life again?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of hard to explain, but in ways I felt angry. I felt like I got ripped off again, and it's a betrayal in a way. And I wasn't mad at him, but in a way I was mad at my mom at certain times because it was that going through that cycle of anger and all of that. I was mad at her because of her. I only got 2 years. So I'm pinpointing it back to a specific thing that I was still blaming her for. I'm blaming her that I only got 2 years with him and I could have had more.
Right.
And that he didn't stick around, but then I had to come to that realization that it could have been worse. I could have had 0 time with him. So I had to work through that.
The details of how you carried through with the divorce.
What's that? I'm sorry.
How do you think that played into like your reactions and how you reacted to the details and things while you was going through the divorce?
As far as the abandonment?
Yeah. Or the feeling of being abandoned again.
Yeah, I think I felt like I was abandoned by everybody at that point. The only ones that I didn't feel abandoned by were my kids. And I think that I became a functioning depressed mother where I did what I needed to do. I took care of my kids and then I collapsed and I'd get up and I'd do it all over again. So I was in a severe state of depression at that point and not knowing exactly why. But I wasn't dealing with conflict. My marriage was disintegrating before my eyes. I didn't understand why he didn't understand. You know, why is this so complicated? Why are you so mean? I mean, we were just in different worlds. So yeah. I think that not having a role model or somebody to go and talk to, because, and I think I told you, my stepdad gave me some really bad advice when I got married about protecting his ego, making sure that I always protected my husband's ego and not, ever let him feel, hurt or whatever. And then that freaked me out. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with that. As I was trying to protect him, I wasn't protecting myself. So I didn't have great advice at all. And I didn't have anybody, I didn't feel like I could go talk to him about what I was feeling, because that's the whole disappointment thing that I didn't want to deal with.
I think that's very important, because I just learned something, that definitely gives. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of women going through divorce. They feel like they're going through that abandonment all over again.
Yep.
And I wonder how much of it is actual alienation versus just somebody that's really hurt and bitter off of that divorce. Because sometimes we see it get better, right?
Well, I think it's a combination, because, I didn't, so my mom alienated me or tried to persuade me to believe all these horrible things about my father. When I was going through my divorce, they told me I was loyal to a fault, that I shouldn't have stayed as long as I did. Why are you still here? Why haven't you left yet?
That's
stayed because he was the father of my children. And I knew what it was like not having my father. So I had a conflict with wanting to do what is being suggested, but I had my foot in both canoes, more or less, where I wanted to stay. But when I decided to go, at that point is when I realized parents are not required, because if my mom can abandon me and then later come and abduct me and just give me a new dad, so I really don't need this either. I could do this by myself. And that was my attitude at that point. I just didn't care. I was pissed off at the world. I was pissed off at my mom, who was sleeping on my couch for 3 months with my husband in the same house under the same roof. And then I had a best friend, and they're all fighting over where I'm going to go. And I was just like, F you all, I'm out. Just get me out of the state. And I took the path of least resistance, and the one I was most familiar with, which was my mother.
And it's kind of, that's interesting again, because like in my first and second divorce, my ex-wife, she grew up in a household where she went back and forth with mom and dad, and their mom had been through numerous divorces. I think the dad had too. I didn't experience that growing up. My mom and dad went through some of the roughest of times, and there was times even as a kid I was like, man, I wish they'd just get a divorce. They stuck through there. And I watched, a couple of years before my dad died, my mom and my dad were so close, and they never gave up on each other. So when the times got hard of my marriage, I'm going to tell you, and I ain't saying this to paint a picture of myself, I stayed to a point I should have left way before.
I understand
my
that.
other side was just ready to give it up right away. It was who initiated. I didn't even see it coming, but they was just ready to give it up. Oh, the kids would be okay. That we'll just go back and forth. And I'm sitting there thinking, that's not what I knew growing up. I saw mom and dad fight for their marriage. Why aren't you fighting?
Yes.
And then we go back to the childhood experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And these are the questions that should have been asked before the marriage. What happens when things get too tough? What's your reaction, do you think, will be, and why? What's that stemming back to? Yeah. Imagine if you'd had that conversation before you got to the point where your wife's on the out, all of a sudden, and you're like willing to stay there, to the detriment almost of yourself, because that's what your experience had been.
Yeah.
That's not hers for some reason, I'm guessing. Imagine if you'd had that conversation already.
So
it could have been different.
They also have questions like this through churches. So your dad being a reverend, was this something that he provided for his congregation? Do churches still do that? I mean, I think there's certain churches that do, maybe not all, but then what would it look like? And would it be the same kind of questions, Alyse, that you're talking about? Would it be
yes, it is. A lot of them do.
Questions like, what are you going to do when you're staring down the aisle of divorce? How are you, do you look at that? Do you talk to them?
Some of them don't, because they don't believe in it. So that's not something that they ask or look at, but I definitely think it should be included.
Yeah.
In this day and age. But I just wanted to just quickly go back to something that Dawn said. When you said you felt ripped off about having your dad back in your life for 2 years and then he passed away, but he was gone for 44 years. You felt ripped off about not having that time with him. That's something that really I feel too. I feel very ripped off for not having had dad in my life for 25 years and then reuniting with him. That ripped off is very strong. I'm very pissed off about that, because that didn't have to be the story.
You know what? Somebody said something to me one time about you have daddy issues, and I was so
that's so offensive.
How dare you just criticize me on any level? But yes, I have daddy issues, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah,
because those are the only issues that I have to hold on to right now. So by saying someone has daddy issues, there's a lot more underlying that, and it should never be talked about in that manner.
Well, we talked about stereotypes earlier. It's what's hurting us through a lot of what we're going through already. That's just another stereotype. Oh, that's just another person with daddy issues. We don't need any more stereotypes.
I mean, I wish I didn't have daddy issues, so I'm not saying I'm proud of them, but I'm proud of the fact that he was my dad and that I missed him.
Right.
Yeah, we can speak those words too, because for many of us, we're not allowed to talk about how much we missed our dad. We're not allowed to talk about our dad. We're not allowed to talk about how much we loved them. That's not a language that is in a vocabulary of a severely alienated child. We're not allowed to do any of those things. So to grow up and actually be able to speak those words is very big for us. So for anybody out there who is withholding children from their parents, like, listen to what we're saying, because we are feeling very ripped off about that, and the child deserves to know the other parent. Like your daughter, Eric, deserves to know you.
Absolutely.
Like, you bring a whole world of wonderful things to the 3 daughters that you have now, and the little one that you're not seeing now she's being ripped off as well.
Yep.
Like
and hopefully she doesn't grow up into us. Hopefully she gets reunited with you soon.
I hope so.
Because otherwise, what kids grow up into is us saying we feel ripped off. And what I really want to say to anybody, I don't care if you're working in a school, if you're a family member of the alienator, if you're a legislator, if you're a judge, the fact that the decision was made on this is my life. I might have been a child at the time, but I own it. It belongs to me, nobody else. And these are my inalienable rights. So by modifying or adjusting or just thinking, well, we're just going to make sure a parent is there, one is better than nothing, that may be true in a lot of cases. And I will say there's great bonus parents, but the child needs access to both of their biological parents. It's an identity thing. It's an internal confidence thing. There's so much inside that you cannot get by just erasing that person.
And then we can choose whether we like them or not. It's not your choice to make that for us.
It's our choice.
You can't choose that we just don't like them. That's taking away our human rights.
And our voice.
Sure. I don't know if you ladies saw the post, or there was a post I think that went viral yesterday. I want to say the guy's name was like Brian Henry, but he talks about he hadn't seen his daughter in a couple of years, and he walks into a store and he hears somebody screaming, "Daddy!" And he turns around and it's his daughter he hadn't seen in 2 years.
I saw that.
Tells him. First thing he tells him, "Mama told me she's tried to call you. You won't answer the phone. You don't want nothing to do with me." And he's sitting there and broke down in tears. That's not true.
In a store.
In a store. In a store. And that is child abuse. I'm sorry.
That's child abuse.
It needs to be.
And the people who are doing this, they need to realize that once we figure these pieces to the puzzle out, we are going to call them on that. So they better be ready for that conversation.
Yeah, when I was reading that story, I could hear the little girl's voice, and she's standing there in a store, and he doesn't even know it's her yet, Alyse. She's saying daddy and calling him again daddy, and he didn't even recognize her at first until he got close enough to realize that it was his daughter standing there calling out to him. So the voice that I heard is her basically claiming she wants access to her father. Otherwise,
Yes.
why would she be standing in the middle of Fred Meyer's saying daddy?
And she still remembered.
Yeah.
Even though it had been a couple of years, she still remembered him. Unfortunately, my case, mine's a baby.
If she didn't want anything to do with him, she would have snuck out and just made it to
That's
where
right.
he
Or
would
she
have
could have been like us and been programmed so terribly that if we'd seen him, we would have
hid.
freaked out and run the other way, which is what our reaction would have been. But that's severe PA, so that's different. Being terrified to that level. But for dads like you, Eric, who haven't been able to get that little bond going, and for the child to know who you are, what is that space? What is the hope for you and the other dads out there who are in the same position, and the other mums as well who've had the child like go, or they've been called not well enough parent or psychiatrically unbalanced or whatever, and they're not seeing the child, because I've got mums in that space too.
Yeah, I mean, I've had many people tell me, this is something that's not going to happen anytime soon. If we do, it'll be 20 years from now, and I don't accept that. And as a father that's grieving, and then not to sound egotistical, but they've got that saying: those who believe they can change the world most of the time are the ones that do.
Yeah.
And if we had more people like that actually believe that we can make a difference, and we come together, we can make that difference.
Absolutely.
20 years is unacceptable, though, because if you're talking about a 2-year-old, she'll be 22. No. If you're talking about a 15-year-old, no. 20 years is not acceptable, because if you want to break it down to what we heard in the courtroom about a child not having, we can't make the poor child ride an hour to go see dad every other day. That's horrible. Add those hours up in a week, and then add that up in a month, and then add that up in a year, and then tell me what 20 years of that equals. And that's what you're robbing that child of.
Kids don't think about the transport time. All we think about is, as I can remember, I'm going to see my dad today, and I was so excited on the inside, but I couldn't show it at the house. It's like you have to internalize it all, and then once you get there, it's like, oh my God, it's my dad.
Have you seen the video of the two kids, the boy and the girl, that came out a week ago as well?
Oh my gosh.
They were told that their dad was dead. They had believed their whole life that their dad was dead, and they just reunited with him. And the tears that flowed from that boy and girl and that dad when they finally got to see each other.
The deception of that is going to ripple, and that other parent is going to feel the effects of that for the rest of their lives.
And I still believe in the best interest. I still believe that mom needs to be in the life. We need to make sure that there has got to be something that was going on for a mom to do that to those two kids. But where does the punishment for something like that?
The children.
Honestly, the punishment ended up on the children, and it ended up on that father that wanted a relationship with those kids. But when I think about punishment, what's happening to that mom that did that to those kids and did that to that dad? Not a damn thing.
No,
and
not legally.
There's something wrong with that.
Right, there is. Not legally, but those children, if they're not too enmeshed with the mom, those children they'll walk away from her.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's what's going to happen more than likely. If they're not, still attached in that enmeshment, then they'll walk away from her, and she will be punished in that way.
I mean, we hadn't even talked.
That's true.
That's
true. Because that's what's happened with my family. A lot of one of my siblings is walking away. I've walked away from my alienator, to the point where I've had to have a very big distance between her so I can put the pieces together, come out of the enmeshment, because we're taught all of these terrible things and we have to put the pieces together. It's a really crappy place to be, because you're being told some truth, some lies, and then you reunite and you hear a whole different set of information that you've been told about that person, and then you got to figure out, is that
you got to realize everything.
And then we've got to analyze it all. Exactly. Then we've got to have time away.
And then we keep analyzing. Yep. Even today, I still figure out everything.
Yeah, it's
Something
like
my mom
putting,
say to me today, I'm going to reanalyze it. I'm going
yeah,
to wrap
yeah.
up.
So I have to say to my dad, you need to tell me the absolute God's truth. I don't care how hard it is, but I cannot be lied to anymore. I need to hear it, and it has to come from me. I can't have him telling me stories. It's too much for me. I have to ask the questions myself. Then he gives me his truth. Then I can try and put the pieces together. But for those of us who grow up in that really severe space, we don't know what's real and what's not, and we spend so much of our energy trying to figure out what's real, what's not, and missing and being in the grief and everything. We don't cope well in general schooling and things like that because we're so got so much crap going on in our own lives and our own heads. We're not able to be children as such. So when we're older, we've got to put all this together. It's a big job.
I just want to make a comment real quick for everybody that's watching. If you're watching from a watch party, we can't see your questions. And I think I just got a pop-up from somebody. So if you want to ask questions, come to the live video on Humanly Possible channel, and then you can ask questions there. Otherwise, we might miss you. So if we're not answering you, that's because you might be on a watch party and we can't see your questions. Okay, sorry about that.
And you ladies are talking about the pieces of the puzzle that you had to put together, you know, and unfortunately, I mean, it's just the way it goes. They love that alienator, the kids do, and that's all they ever knew until that point. They're just missing that other side. So then once you find out there's that other side and you got these pieces of the puzzle to put together, then it becomes loyalty. It's like, which one do I choose? I don't know who to believe. And that's got to be so traumatizing for a kid. And that's just some of the details that people aren't thinking when we allow this to continue going on. We are allowing kids that are being traumatized that a lot of the times they repeat the cycle, you know?
Yeah, especially if we don't get to the point where we can see what's going on. Once we've seen it, once we've stepped out of it, we can change it. That's why Alyse and I are speaking, because we hope that someone's listening and they'll realize that they need to step out of it so that they can use their own voice and make their own decision, come to their own truths, not somebody else's.
You're talking about child, Dawn.
Yeah, nobody needs to be spoon-fed what their truth is. They need to go and understand what that truth really is, which means they've got to step out of it. And then that's when the child can break that cycle and hopefully not continue to repeat that again and again.
To the outsider hearing about parental alienation and thinking, like, can a parent really do this? To think about how easy it was to get your kids to believe in Santa Claus. Parents have a lot of power with love and their authority. And I had a friend that brought that up to me earlier this week, Robert Garza, and I was like, man, that made a lot of sense.
Yeah,
but as
we trust the parent 100% with our lives. We are enmeshed with both of them, basically, when we start out. And we rely on the fact that they're our security, they're our safety. We trust everything they say. So when they're telling us that so-and-so is a horrible person, someone's trying to kill you, you know, and all these things are happening, the child's going to believe you because you're their parent and they love you and they know you love them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's a lie, they can't detect. The children are not great lie detectors. They don't know that yet. They haven't learned that skill yet, unless they have internal memory, memories that they think about, which we've talked about memories before. The memories are what saved my relationship with my father. And that, I think, is really important, because at least you have memories as well.
Yeah. So I had memories, but a lot of them were tainted. So we'd be having a good experience, but then you go home and you say anything about the experience, it can be turned around into a negative. So you're stuck in this vortex. It's just such a weird space. And then intuitively, though, I loved my dad, so it didn't matter what I was being told. I intuitively knew that he was not going to hurt me, that he loved me. But it's not a space that children should be put in, to be thinking, like, am I being lied to or not? I mean, that's psychological abuse on a whole other level. Children should be just happy with trusting people they can trust around them, being able to go and just hang out outside, go to school, not worry about if someone's going to turn up to take you, whatever, which is what was happening for us. We should be allowed to be children, not any of this other crap, like we're going to visit mom at her house on the weekend, or dad, that blah blah blah. What, it's just, we just should be let to be children.
What we really need is when we have two homes, we need to just go and have our life with one parent, and then what goes on in that home goes on in that home. Then we need to be able to go back to the other home and live that life that's in that home without the conflict of that argument between that's good, that's bad. We need to be able to survive in these two homes, because surviving in the two homes is doable. That is humanly possible for children to survive and live and thrive in two homes with parents that are not tainting the memories. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, support. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And if you can't do that, go and get some counseling about how to do that, and do it for the children, because ultimately it's you two who chose to bring the children into the world, and ultimately it's your job to make sure that that child is thriving.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you know, one of the biggest things, and I've had this a few times this week already, that men come to me about, and it seems to happen really early on, sometimes it goes for years, is when they get in a divorce and a mom tries to immediately get their kids to call somebody else daddy.
Oh no!
Trigger warning.
That can't be happening. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Stop doing that right now.
Eric, you know the first thing my mom said to me when she took me off that stairwell?
Was that it?
This is your new daddy.
Yeah.
That is, for me, one of the worst things you can do to a child.
Right. And it's hard to talk to somebody that's angry about that, because again, justifiably they're angry. And I think that's just some of the silly things that go on when people break up. That cut that shit out, man.
Yeah.
It's not
the shit out.
That is still their mom. That is still their dad. And
yes.
you two,
if you want to give them a bonus dad, that's one thing. We can't stop people from, having new relationships, right? So there might be bonus parents involved in the child's life, and that's something that everybody kind of has to adjust to. But the child does not need a replacement mommy or daddy, period.
That's a surefire sign of alienation right away.
That should be the biggest flag in the courtroom. As soon as a judge hears, I don't want them to have custody, that right there, that's all that needs to be heard. That's it.
Yeah. And we don't want to call other people dads. FYI, we don't want to. We've got a dad. Thanks very much.
Build the relationship,
Eric,
maybe.
You're your daughter's dad. You are. Whether you're in her life or not, you're her dad.
Exactly.
You are her dad. You're her biological father.
I don't talk about personal details of my case too much, but I will go into one thing. I had a conversation one day. It was like, one day I'm going to find me a good man. He's going to be good to me. He's going to be good to the girl. He's going to make her a new dad. And I was like, one thing, I will always be daddy.
That's right.
But here's the other thing, and I'll set you in your place right now. If you find somebody that's good to you, that's good to my daughter, that's good for your home, nobody's going to be more proud than this guy right here. It's just not. That should be natural. You moved on. That's great. We can do this. But just trying to say, hey, I'm going to replace you and I'm going to let you know later on. It's triggers, man. And they're gaslighting you, and don't fall for it. It's a very common thing. It really is.
And the children resent a step parent coming in and trying to erase that relationship as well, which does happen.
Yep. And I'm your new dad. It's like, I'm not calling you that. And I can tell you now, of all the stepdads that I had, I never called any of them dad. I had a dad. It was the only thing that I could hold on to. I had everything else erased from my dad, but that was the one choice that I had. I felt that I had. With no choices, that's the one thing I did have. I knew I had a dad, and I was not sure as shit never going to be calling anyone else dad. That was that. It's the only thing I had.
This leads me into the segue of talking about Chris and his daughter. in the court case that just the horrific, even the concept of this court case, why it even was allowed to go as far as it did. So this was a little triggering for me when I first read it, when you first brought him on, and I was like, oh, hell no, I am not going to be quiet about this. And I remember just like hitting that keyboard. I was a keyboard warrior that day. It was like,
what's the context? Can you fill us in over here in Australia?
Yeah, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, or unless you want to tell the story, you might tell it better than we do. Yeah, that's me.
So Chris had an ex-wife. They had gotten a divorce. She had gotten a boyfriend that lived with her for about, I think it was 9 months. During that time, Chris and his ex-spouse had 50-50. They worked together for the child. She died. She passed away. So automatic rights should go to dad. Unfortunately, this living boyfriend started trying to fight for rights for Chris's daughter to take away custody from the father. And there is some asinine law in the state of Texas that was about to let him do it. Chris spent close to $300,000 fighting for his own flesh and blood from a boyfriend. And I think all of that money should return.
My blood
the most unnecessary battle that had ever happened. But as soon as he got out of court today, he wrote me and let me know they won it, and it's fine. It's done. It's done. But I can't even believe we're even having conversations about something like that.
That would have been like us being awarded to one of my mum's boyfriends, and there were a lot who just happened to be around when my mum died. If I had been awarded to one of them,
the only criteria is that they lived together for 6 months. That's it. That's it. 6 months.
If I had been awarded custody to one of my mum's boyfriends after they'd been together for 6 months and not my dad, what the hell?
Yep, that was about to happen here. The Texas District Court was allowing it. They actually awarded this shared custody between the two men. And then the Supreme Court finally said no, permanent with the father, with the biological father, which thank God they did, because this little girl does not need to go through that.
They need to be talking to adult children of divorce about what they think about that.
I told them I'll be an expert witness, whatever. We might need to start doing that.
And not to make a gender case out of this, could you see this case happening if that would have been a mother?
I can't believe it happened at all.
I can't even believe it happened with that. But it was like, here he goes. He has to go through this. He already had 50-50 custody, has to go and fight in court, has to pay $300,000. It gets drugged through the public. At what point does this guy have to go through to be daddy to his own child?
First, it's legal kidnapping of someone else's child, and he had to spend $300,000 to retain the right to be her father. That, I can't say it on air, is bullshit. It just pisses me off.
That's what it is. That's exactly.
But I can't imagine, like, how healthy was this step father? Like, they weren't married, were they? Like, step boyfriend? Like, what is that? What is his name? I don't know. But like, how healthy was he? What are the psychologically? If I put my psych hat on, I would be wondering, why is he wanting custody of the little child? What are the reasons behind that? Like, is seeing his ex-partner in her? Is there another more insidious reason that could be going on here? Is it like, what is it? Was he psychiatric evaluated about that? Was he put through that? What were his answers? Like, there's so much to this.
It's
so
Eric,
big.
My theory, because I haven't talked to either one of, nobody in this party at all. My theory is maybe the guy was maybe he loved the mother very much, and I feel like the daughter was that trophy.
Could have been.
Remember it.
Could have been good reasons, could have been bad reasons.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the dad should have been given first preference. It's his
without
daughter.
a doubt, with no questions asked. It should have never gotten like this.
what does it say though for a boyfriend to think that he can actually take a daughter from the father? All right, so, and I think that we see this more than often. You know, I know that there's some step parents out there that have been the best thing that's ever came into some kids' life. I'll never deny that fact. I know a few of them myself. But when you first get with somebody and they're telling you how sorry their ex was and that they don't have much, you need to find out the other side of that story, because you might be
Dawn
trying
can
to
attest to that. Dawn can attest to that because her stepfather was filled with all sorts of stuff about what was going on, why they had to kidnap Dawn one afternoon. He was really roped into believing that story by Dawn's mum, and didn't realize right up, like he didn't even realize
actually
at all, did he?
You know how I found this out, and this is going to sound really sad. If Bill McGee's still on here, he was on here earlier. I sent him a chapter of my late stepfather's book, and I didn't realize what I had sent him, and it was all about that story.
What's the context, Dawn?
About the kidnapping and why they came down to kidnap me. He actually came right out and said, we went to California and full out kidnapped her daughter. Literally says this in writing.
Because of what he'd been told about
because of what he was told. And
by your mother.
It was the silver bullet. And he never, my biological dad never knew he was affected by the silver bullet, because I just found it out this year.
What's the silver bullet, Dawn? Can you tell people what you mean by that? Because a lot of people don't understand that term.
Well, actually, Eric might explain it a lot better than me.
Yeah, Eric, you please take it away. You've probably had lots to do with that term.
Well,
lots of guys, lots of fathers.
I'm going to tell you, I honestly thought that was a rare situation too, and I was very hesitant when I first started this because I've never encountered a silver bullet. And people would come and tell me their stories of where they had been accused of molestation, or they've been accused of, being on drugs or abuse. And I was like, I'm not really going to touch that, just because, what if they actually did? The last thing this guy's going to be caught dead doing is protecting somebody that's actually done this. And I found out how many people were actually going through the real silver bullet. And it happens. I don't know. I would almost be inclined to say that it happens more times that it's a silver bullet than it is the truth. From what I'm seeing, what I saw in this past week again in South Carolina was a legislator that was running for office that wanted to get shared parenting in there, and they came and painted him as a wife beater and held up signs all across town saying no domestic violence, no domestic violence, and it cost him the election. He got hit with the silver bullet in politics because they knew that he was about to go up against this. And let's look at what this guy was up against in the state of South Carolina. He's in a place that the senator in that state, they get to pick the very judges that are on that bench. The senator that's there that he was going up against picks the judges. He's also an attorney. He's picking the judges that he gets to argue cases in front of. You want to talk about conflict of interest? So how are we going to get him out of here? Because the guy I was endorsing, he was kicking butt. He was going to get into office. Let's shoot that silver bullet, domestic violence. And I knew as soon as I saw it, I was like, here it goes. Here it goes, because they know there's a reason it's called the silver bullet. It's effective. If I can say that somebody abused somebody, they raped them, that is one of the most heinous acts that another human being could do, especially to a child. You're on the defensive from the very get-go.
Especially when it's not true and you're using it.
Exactly. And the part that pisses me off the most is if you got the money to where you can actually fight off that silver bullet and prove that's what they did. Most of the time, nothing happens to the party that did it. So it's so easy. It's so easy to use. And that's another thing that we talk about so hard with shared parenting legislation. A lot of times they've got shared parenting bills that are going out that are not asking for evidence-based allegations. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to give these lawyers and attorneys that love that money out, just start shooting those off like a machine gun. Mm-hmm. We've got to get aggressive here. And we've got to make sure.
We need to eliminate tenured judges. We need to eliminate tenured anything.
Career politicians.
They need to have a certain amount of time that they're allowed to serve, and then they need to be rotated out.
Well, you make a good point, because the person I was just talking about, guess how long he's been in office? 28 years.
Yeah,
So he
no.
just got in for another 4. He will be there 32
blood
years.
and a new set of eyes in there, because he's running that state with one set of eyes for 28 years. How does that make sense?
You're talking about a multi
I know.
millionaire, okay? That job pays $10,000 per year. So
Yeah,
I don't think he's after that job for, the little salary. There's something behind it.
There's
Come on.
corruption going on for someone to walk out of office and becoming a millionaire.
Well, and it was a good thing for me to see it, because it showed me just how big of a fight we're up against. Sometimes I think we can go out there and we're going to get things go. We're up against a very corrupt system. Billions and billions of dollars a year are being made by destructing our families. Guys, it's going to take a fight.
Yeah,
It's gonna take
or
a
we
fight.
we come one step earlier and we look at big mediation stuff going on before anyone even steps into court. Have the counseling, have the mediation, because one woman that I had in this week, she's been accused of domestic violence against her partner, and basically they've taken the children away from her. She's not allowed to talk to them. She's allowed to talk, I think, for 2 hours an afternoon. She's at risk of going to jail at the moment. But what I found out was she's got a very long history of domestic violence through her family. So her mother and father used to practice it. Her mother particularly practiced it against her father, and vice versa. So it was very, very normal. When I took her through the 9 different categories of domestic violence and the 10 different categories underneath all of them, even minimal things like just being sarcastic is under the term DV. Just gaslighting, just swearing, all of these things that we do as normal out in the community, they're all DV. But this woman, for her, this was her normal. So she doesn't understand how to communicate when she gets frustrated or anything. So if we teach her all of these communication skills, get her to understand what DV is, get her to understand what her history has been, and learn how to be do the healing around what she was exposed to, instead of just knee-jerk reaction. That's the language I was taught. This is what I learned in my family system. She'll have a hope. Her children will have a hope now that it's not being transferred down into them. She can stop the intergenerational trauma now by doing the work on it. This doesn't need to go to court, where she is now growing up without the children. They are not having a mother. The kids are suffering. They are the ones who are going to be paying this price. To put it into the court systems, and now the feasting begins with the lawyers and the judges and everything. It shouldn't need to get to that point. We should grab it way before then, and then that's going to stop that system from the greed and power that's going on there. And we can teach our families how to actually be the better version of themselves. A lot of people don't. The person I had in this week, bawling her eyes out, wants to learn a new way, wants to learn a new nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg teaches nonviolent communication versus violent communication, which is what most of our community, that's the language that we speak anyway. Nonviolent communication teaches us how to be empathic, how to listen to other people, how to listen to their stories, understand ourselves. We have to start doing work on ourselves to be better people, be better parents, stop that trauma coming through. Keep it out of the friggin' courts. The courts are out of control. Is a $50 billion industry high conflict divorce? Get it out of the courts. If we can control that narrative and can change what we're actually learning, they don't get a say in our families if we are doing the work for ourselves now. That's my thinking.
You're never going to get it out until you get this out of it. We've got to take the incentive out of it. We can't allow them to make money at the expense of these families anymore. And when it comes to these false allegations, I'm a little ruthless when it comes to that. If somebody's found making that false allegation, I think they should get twice the punishment of the person that they was making it out for, at least the same punishment. But I would say twice, because if somebody could do that, that's a dangerous person. You were willing to completely ruin somebody's life just so you can win and keep control of whatever. That is that's a very scary person.
That's unforgivable. And I've gone on record saying that you deserve a prison sentence for doing what you did. And not only do you need that prison sentence, you need to serve on top of that whatever the other person that the victim served. So if they served 10 years, you get 10 years on top of your own in addition, but not at the same time. It's consecutive. So,
and think if you've been accused of domestic violence or rape or something like that, then you've got to go around with that card, or you know, you got to register as a sex offender for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So if they got caught, they should have to register as a bullshitter that this person's dangerous. They can make false allegations against you. I think that would
live the same life as, they need to go through that same thing, because we've got to stop the silver bullet. We have so many people out there that are too afraid to come forward because of the shame and because of all of this. And then when we don't believe them right off the bat, that right there is rejection. And we're just compiling that problem that is actually real. When you have this BS stuff that you're just, trying to get your way through life, you're selfish and you're only thinking of yourself. You're not thinking about not only the person that you victimized, but all of the other people that have suffered this ordeal for real.
Yeah, true. And then there's a shadow side to this. So the other thing is they could also be victims themselves, and that's the only way that they know. So that's again where the training and the learning how to be a communicator comes in, because if that's only what they know, or they're being fed that by try this method also by an attorney or something, then they're looking for that. So we've got that coming in. So they need to not only have a potential punishment, but also have mandatory counselling so that they can understand why they've done that too, and maybe give them a chance to heal as well. So there's a lot of components here to these behaviors.
And in addition to that, when you mentioned the attorneys, let's talk about ethics when it comes to attorneys on top of that. Because any attorney that is out there saying, let's go after everything, let's do the silver bullet, they need to have ethics violations against them. We need to stop them in their tracks as well.
And
they're contributing to the child abuse.
Exactly.
100%. And I believe that child support is necessary to a fault. I do. Children has needs. There's some parents out there that are going to be the true deadbeats, and they're going to try to run from it. You need to take care of your kids. But I believe we should have child support maximums and stuff that actually makes sense. $200, $300 a month per child. That should help get their clothes, put food in their mouth. Some of these people paying, I talked to somebody the other day, is paying $7,000 a month for 2 kids.
And they can't afford their own home.
That's not child support.
No.
And I know that one of the systems over there, I saw it, if you don't pay your child support, you're put in jail. So a lot of your jails are filled with people who've lost their jobs, paid very, very high court fees, haven't been able to bring in an income, and then they've been jailed for it as well, even though they love their children, they want to see their children. But the system that they're caught in is, see, over here, we don't do that in Australia. You don't pay your child support. It goes on the record, and eventually, if you ever come into money, it's pulled off there. So you will eventually pay it, but you're not jailed for it.
Right.
So this is a big problem, it seems to me, over there.
And we have no idea how many people that are in prison because of not paying child support. And that's a big problem.
Well, unfortunately, we got sheriff's offices like we had earlier today that are putting their pictures out there for everybody to see and saying, hey, everybody, here's the deadbeat.
The IRS
child support. We put them in jail. Well, see, first they take your license. So how are you going to get to work to even, make the money for the child support? And maybe you can bum a ride. But then we put them in jail because we know that's how you get caught up on child support. Thing is, while you're in jail, child support just keeps on coming. It's not like they stop it. It just keeps on coming. Why? It's the incentive. The state should not be profiting off of that for 1 second. I don't know. Do you guys have something similar to Title 4D?
No, our state's not profiting off that whatsoever. There's nothing. That seems to be, that's very odd. So we have child support. Child support, yep, they pay it. It's a percentage of the wage. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know that my partner has been paying, I think, $1,200 to $1,500 per month for the entire time that his daughter has been alive. And
One
he
kid?
was happy. That's a percentage of his wage, but he's never ever seen her since she was like a 1-year-old or something, and now she's 19. He's been paying all that money for all that time until she turned 18 with no benefits whatsoever. But if he'd stopped, he wouldn't have been put in jail. They just would have racked up. He wouldn't have been allowed out of the country. It would have racked up to the point where eventually, if he'd got any sort of money coming into him, they would have taken it out of that. If he'd been left some in a will or got a new job or something like that, they'd start garnishing. It's called garnishing the wages here. But there's not, I'm wondering how many people are killing themselves if they're on that bloody treadmill of not being able to afford it, get their license taken off them, or they're anxious or depressed or completely grief-stricken because they're not seeing their children, so therefore they're not functioning, so then they're being penalized for being in grief. And what? Like, it's not even logical. Who decided that was a good idea?
I don't remember the year. I know that there was something that was put into effect that was supposed to help like non-custodial moms when the dad left, get governmental assistance, and divorce just skyrocketed after that happened because a lot of them was like, okay, I can get help, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave. Whereas before they would have tried to stay and work things out. So the government started taking care of a lot of them. So Title 4D came into effect to reimburse the states for a lot of that temporary assistance that was going out.
I see.
So they started reimbursing the states off of every dollar that was paid in child support. And now we've got a way that we can actually make money to make sure these people are paying child support.
That was the Child Care Act.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you make more money? You make sure the parents paying more.
Oh, well, that just completely destroys the family system, doesn't it? And what's the suicide? Is anyone doing any research on the suicide of the people who are being affected, the men and women who are being affected by getting their licenses taken off them and not being able to go to work and then getting thrown in jail and then the fees are racking up? Like, is anyone doing research on this at all with regards to suicide?
I think they should, but unfortunately, I think the ones that are going through that have been painted as the deadbeats by society from the stereotypes. Nobody cares about them. They're looked at as pieces of trash. If they could, you can sit there and be put up against a child support order and alimony that you can't afford, and a parent that's not letting you be in their life, you're still a deadbeat. You could be trying everything, exhausting all your resources, and still not coming up on that end, but you're still a deadbeat to society. They don't give a crap about you. Nobody's talking about us. Nobody.
Well, that's what they did to my dad, and I'm here to say that he wasn't a deadbeat at all. He was very, very hardworking, but I was told that he was a deadbeat. He didn't care about us. All he thought about was himself. Same crappy dialogue. But I know he was working as a salesman, a panel beater. Sure, he had another family, but he was a very, very hard worker. He was trying to pay maintenance to us, but when he was paying maintenance, he still wasn't allowed to see us. So, God, as I said, we need to bring in more mandatory counselling. We need to bring this in, and if people are coming in for family systems work, and they're being not deemed to be actually being helpful in the room, and they're not being looking at their own stuff, I mean, then let's look at another process down the road. But we've got to put this in place first. Put the money in counsellors and therapists and family therapists instead of the frigging court systems.
And
we've got the money in the wrong place. It seems to me it's not until everybody's in court and $300,000, did you say, to be able to see his daughter? Oh,
well, and that's not
the
just
gentleman you were talking about before who had his.
That's not just to child support. There's fines, there's fees, there's all kinds of things just to file. So you have to pay so much to file this form, and then you have to dispute or whatever, answer some other And
Let's
every
take
single
it out of court.
you
Get
have
it
to
out of
do
court.
something. Then you have to pay your attorney to do the work, to write the letter, and then to submit it for you. So it's
No.
a cash cow.
No,
Average
get it out of
divorce in
court.
America is $15,000. That's more than I'd say the average of America is making per year, almost after taxes. So then you still got to take care of a kid. You got to take care of yourself. You got to make sure you're going to work. And now you take times like now, the coronavirus, a lot of people are out of work, businesses are hurting, and then you're going to plaster their faces all over the internet and say, hey, look at these deadbeats. You know, and the thing is, I agree with you. I think there should be some sort of counseling. But when we talk about mandatory counseling, if it's set up by the government, they'll find a way to profit off of that too. They find a way to profit off of everything. The biggest thing is trying to get the government out of our lives and make sure that when we do go to family court, it's cases that actually need it, because there's going to be times that they do. For the most part, these parents could be working it out amongst themselves. It's things like, you know, and going back to the silver bullet, Dawn, you know you was a part of an MPO. MPO got that bill passed up. I think it was Kansas. 1 year domestic violence accusations down 50%. 50%. What happened? Did domestic violence go down, or the accusations? It's because
one of the other
cases were staying out of family court.
Yeah.
Yep.
Goodness gracious. Well, we've got a long way to go, but shine a light on it big time today.
I wanted to give you another example, Alyse, of what happens with people that owe child support in the United States. They're basically, if someone doesn't pay their taxes, they're lower than them. If someone doesn't pay their student loan debt, they're even lower than them. So here's people that owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debts, or lots in taxes, and then you have someone that owes child support. The person that owes child support goes to prison because that doesn't apply. The debtor's prison doesn't apply to someone that owes child support. And on top of that, most of people in America recently received a stimulus check because of COVID. Everybody except for those that owe child support. And what Eric was talking about was this sheriff, or a couple, was it just one department in Colorado, or was it?
No, so it happened about 2 months ago at a place called the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office. They did the exact same thing. And it's the one time I was like super, super proud of our movement, because everybody showed up and showed them how they felt about it, and they ended up deleting it. So then they tried to make a rebuttal to be like, well, this is what we really meant, and we're not going to let you shut us up. Well, they ended up deleting that too, because we just weren't having it. Well, the same thing happened today at a place called Craven County Sheriff's Office. He made something called Operation Pay Up. And he put all these pictures of people that he arrested for non-payment of child support during the time of coronavirus, and basically made them look like the scum of society without knowing what their stories are or anything. And I have to keep my mouth shut on people like that. It's just, it's sickening. And people wonder why nobody trusts the police.
Yeah, a sheriff's department, someone that is supposed to be for the people, posted people's names of who will or who will not get a stimulus check because they owe child support.
Yep.
That is unacceptable.
Okay.
I mean, they don't necessarily make that public for people that are on the sexual offenders list. I mean, I think it was easier to find the list of who didn't pay child support.
Well, we've allowed these stereotypes to exist too long. We really have. And unfortunately, sometimes it's hard to get people to work together towards that common cause. A lot of them are broke, and they feel like they don't know what to do. But
yeah, they're not deadbeats, they're dead broke is what they.
That's right.
What's the guy's name that said that? I can't remember his
So
name.
On that note, yeah, do you have anything that we want to end on? We've been going for 2.25 hours now, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to scroll through here, see if we had questions. We had lots of comments in here.
You got a lot on Dad Talk. We were in a watch party, and I'd like to say to anybody that's on Dad Talk today, please follow Dawn and Alyse. They're two sweethearts. They're doing a really good work with this, and it's conversations like this that definitely shift the narrative, and the more that we can have, the better. And I'm definitely proud of you two, and thank you so much for allowing
Thank
me
you, Eric.
Well, we're proud. You know what, Eric? I owe a lot of this to you, because you're the one that got me started, gave me the confidence to be out here. So, and then, you know, Eric, Alyse, he was like, you and Alyse, you guys would make a good co-hosting team.
Yeah, we're just two adult kids of severe PA who are hanging out together trying to change the world and get people to hear what it's like for the children of divorce. That's what we're doing. We just teamed up to do this because not many people have heard from our cohort before. So, or if they have, they've kept their story very secret and only released it in books or something. But we're on Humanly Possible interviewing lots of kids, of adult kids of alienation, so that the story gets out there. It's not, we're not so stigmatized, we're not so unusual. There's millions of us. We just weren't taught to have voices.
Yep.
But thank
We're
goodness
not
Dawn
that
and I have done heaps of work. We're not that, we were broken, but we can heal, and we can stand up and go, no, cut it out.
Yes. Yeah, so Humanly Possible Channel is the name of what Alyse and I are hosting this on, but we also talk about other topics. So it's a series of topics. So we talk about families, which this falls underneath the families. We also talk about mental health, and we also talk about child sexual abuse. We also talk about what we're calling adult kids of divorce and separation, which is the interviews that we're doing. That's what we have a hashtag ACODS, and it means that adult kids of a divorce and separation. And then there's the Y CODS, which is the youth kids of divorce and separation as well. So we are bringing these collections to the Humanly Possible channel, because when it all is said and done, and as we start gathering and creating this content, it's a big picture, and it includes the mental health. It includes everything that we're talking about in there.
It all fits in together.
And we especially interview people who are very, very altruistic, like Eric, who is showing communities that it can take one person to change a community, and it can take one person to shine the light on different things going on in the world. You can be a voice by yourself. And so people who are very resilient and have been through a lot and have amazing stories, and are just not sitting around in addiction and whinging and poor me, they're actually getting out there and going, nah, I can change this. I'm going to start this from my backyard. I'm going to create a talk show. I'm going to create a blog. I'm going to create a change in society. And that's you, Eric. And that's why we wanted to bring you on, because we also do these stories of people like who are trying to change their communities, like you are, like Ben Biddick is. And we've got Dr. Truett Wagner coming on next week, who runs a Facebook channel and his own studio in New York. He's a professor. He runs what's something called Disabilities Redefined. And he interviews all these people with all these different disabilities and challenges, and what makes their lives amazing, having disabilities, what builds their resilience, what are they doing to change their world. I mean, one of the girls that he works with, I remember her, she has Down syndrome, but she's also a top international catwalk model. So all of these amazing people with these amazing stories, anything that's humanly possible, that's what we're talking about on our channel. And Ben Biddick, if you didn't see his interview, blow your mind. He's an ex-army medic, and he's all about service in the community and helping people with PTSD and how to build resilience. And his talk show has over 120 interviews with people just about their resilience. And he teamed up with Adam Greenberg, who got to the pitch. I think he was in one of the Miami Cubs. And the first time he ever hit Major League Baseball, the baseball hit him in the back behind his ear, and he's had to come back from that. So he talks about the resilience that he had to show, and that's that's a lot of Ben's work as well. So that's who we talk to. And Jack, the one of my clients who lives with very serious schizophrenia, and what he has to do to settle down 300 or 400 voices in his head a day and be resilient and go to work, and what that's like for him. So that's who we talk to.
And his experience with PA as well.
And ask him about PA too. And so that's why we wanted Eric on our show too, because he definitely fits that criteria. So thank you, Eric, for coming and talking to us. And flipping the interview, that was pretty that was awesome too. So I love talking to you. Yeah. So
we will also have Dr. William Burnett will be joining us on July 17th.
Right.
So that will be an interesting interview as well.
Yeah.
Dr. Bill's got a lot of statistics that he can bring to the table.
Yes.
Okay.
We're excited about that.
Yeah,
So,
wonderful.
Some great interviews coming. So again, Eric, is there anything that you would like to say to anybody at this point? We talked on so many topics tonight, you could take your pick. What would you want to say to people listening right now?
Get active, get involved, and when you feel like you can't go anymore, that's when you got to continue pushing. We can change the world if we change ourselves first. And that's really where change starts, is when we decide to do something different today that we didn't do yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So
yes. How about you, Alyse?
You.
Any closing?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also wanted to mention Tessa Sarich, whose brother had paranoid schizophrenia and who died by suicide, and just how she's trying to change her world as well. And all of the other adult kids of parental alienation who've been on our channel and had their stories shared as well. Everybody's trying to make a difference in their world, and I'm asking, what are you trying to do to make your world a better place as well, and focus on that. And together as a collective, awesome group. Your vibe attracts your tribe. Basically, that's all I've got to say on the matter. Thank you everyone for watching us today.
I love the tribe piece, where you find your tribe and then you get active together, you support each other, and you go out there, you change yourself so you can change the world, but you start with yourself.
Yeah,
and that is really all you need to do. Because if you think about trying to change the world, that's an enormous job. But if you think about just changing you, and Alyse, you've taught me something that I think is so valuable. I talk about it every single day now, but that's that unconditional positive regard. And when we start treating people with unconditional positive regard, we are changing ourselves. We are changing how people perceive us. And then eventually maybe you rub off a little bit on them and you start changing them. So when you get up tomorrow and somebody makes you mad, think about #UPR. UPR it.
Unconditional positive regard.
Yep.
And try and look at your stories and find out what you can share about them and learn about them, like Alyse Lauren did, and how Bill McGee's written his book. Like, we're all working together on this. So everybody's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. So Eric, thank you for joining us, taking time. I know you've been a busy guy, but we appreciate you carving some time out for us and sharing everything you do, because you've done a lot in a short period of time, and that's an amazing thing. And we wanted to hire you. We want to have you as a permanent member on our videos on our page. So, again, thank you very much. And thank you for supporting us all along from the very start. So I didn't see any questions, and you said there were some on the support group. So maybe I'll try and scour or go through there tomorrow. Let me know if there's any other questions. And also with Alyse, people could probably maybe tag us in there, so we'll be sure to answer any questions that people have. And on that note, we would like to tell everybody, have a great evening. Thank you for spending all this time with us, and we'll see you again soon.
Have a great day from the Aussies.
Yes, I know. I keep forgetting that.
It's only lunchtime here.
Day.
Yep. See ya.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Have a great night.